Welcome to the reference video for Cultivating Cognitive Liberty. This is an exciting topic for me because when I discovered this process, this science, this framework, I got really excited and really daunted by the fact that I felt like I didn't know anything and I had to relearn everything. But it was a great blessing to be given the framework, the format, the step-by-step sort of process of how the brain operates, how we acquire, a deeper understanding of our reality, and essentially how we come to know ourselves. So this, cognitive liberty, and that is the result. Cognitive liberty and having the ability to be able to think for yourself beyond the scope of believing everything that you read and hear. That's really where this method is the most powerful, and it's probably more so a lifelong journey to be able to reorganize the brain so that the brain subconsciously is operating on a level that is in coherence with, this three-step process we're about to go into. And essentially the 7 liberating arts. So the brain can be organized in a way that it can understand and really allow it, to become a processing tool to be able to learn and to think and to be able to navigate your environment with greater and greater levels of certainty, where you know for a fact that what you're doing is the right thing to be doing, and what you're doing is, the best thing to be doing, essentially. And discerning from fact and fiction and truth and lies, and being able to identify manipulation and manipulation in the media these days is especially relevant because we are just bombarded with media, and the mainstream media is really just geared up. The modern world in 2020 is just geared up to really condition the mind and to close a circle around that, to cage the mind, and really just, it's all about controlling the mind. Because with artificial intelligence coming into our lives, it's already in our lives, on our devices, in our phones, and with the next wave of artificial intelligence coming into our lives, the answer, the biggest answer from the, whoever you want to call, whoever's sort of designing this and spearheading this whole agenda, they don't really have an answer for how to deal with the population and how to deal with so many people when they don't need so many people. And the biggest answer that they have, the best answer they have, is to dumb everyone down, which is the same answer that's been the agenda for like the last 50 to 100 years, is to dumb down the population and to extend their, and to create an artificially an extended adolescence within that population. So they are just consuming video games, and consuming media and just being entertained on a minimal universal income. That's probably part of the reason why they're trying to usher that in with the corona thing and the whole giveaway. But I'm not going to dive into that. Let's dive in to the Trivium method and the Quadrivium, which makes up the 7 liberal arts. So the Trivium means 3, where 3 roads meet, and the Quadrivium is 4. So a little bit of a backstory about the Trivium and the Quadrivium. Trivium pertains to words and word figures, and this is like the method for understanding our reality when we're facing the words that we ascribe to our reality. So it's the elementary 3, and when used in the correct order, i.e. 1, 2, 3, it follows a natural process of outlining, minimal effort in learning any new subject for yourself, with in half the speed that it takes normally to learn a subject, and it basically just is a universal method that can be applied across the board to anything. Whether you want to learn no matter what you want to learn, whether you just want to learn what is true in the media, you can use the Trivium method to start to navigate and start to build a base of knowledge for your understanding so that you have the wisdom to take action in accordance with truth, with the highest form of truth that you can establish for yourself. So it's important for you to be, this is actually the gap between stimulus and response, where you actually start to then think for yourself. So let us begin. Here I've got the brain and the computer. They work in similar fashions. They work in a simple, basic, fundamental way of input, processing, and output. These are the 3 steps that are so universal across the board in all these different areas of life, whether it's our digestion, whether it's our brain and how it takes in information and how it has to process that information to then be able to output words, to be able to speak, to be able to talk in a coherent manner. That is, this is the 3-step method in relationship to our brain and to computers, because computers originally, and still today, even though AI is disrupting this whole thing, because it's becoming this input process, but computers, naturally, they require a mouse and a key, and they need input, and then they will do the processing behind the scenes in the chips and the, all the wires and stuff, and then it'll output, a picture on the screen. MS-DOS is going to give you, a very pixelated result of its processing, which is a result of your input. And this is the framework, this is the structure, this is what is known as the Trivium method in action. So a little bit about the Trivium method. Let's do a little history lesson. Let's go back in time, and we're going to look at, the single room schoolhouses that were around, say 100, 150 years ago in, let's just picture this, 150 year ago America, where, there was a whole bunch of, new colonizers in America, and they were coming from England. They had to look after themselves, have to learn and teach, and they didn't have the support of, the government, so to speak. They were making their own government. They were creating their own thing. And what they taught, how they organized themselves, and how they taught the children and the community was through single room schoolhouses. Now, in these schoolhouses, everyone was learning the same subjects, essentially. All the children, no matter if you're 3 to 5 to 10 to 15, everyone's in this room and everyone's learning the same thing, and everyone's using this Trivium method to understand reality, to define fact from fiction, and to build a body of knowledge up. And it was a really fascinating system for education, because you'd have the older students teaching the younger students, and it's really this process of, when you're teaching a subject, that's when you learn the subject again, but from a different perspective. But what happened was that in these single room schoolhouses, they had this method. They had knowledge of the Trivium, they had knowledge of the Quadrivium, which highlights number and takes you down the road of numbers and geometry and music and astrology or cosmology. But they had this method of learning which allowed them to think for themselves, and that's so important. And that's the origins of modern America, and that's probably why it's so glorified, because you had a whole population of people that were well educated, that had a really good education, because they could think for themselves. In comes the modern industrial era and modern education system, the public education system, and what do? They removed this component from the schooling system, from the education system, and they actually cut it up and started to teach it as an explicit, they started to teach it directly without actually teaching the method of being able to learn. So you've got these you can see the shadow of the method in different subjects today, but no one's actually talking about the method that gives you the ability to free your own mind, to learn any subject, and to find liars, truth from lies, essentially, in your environment. So, and, being able to eliminate the contradictions is a very valuable thing in today's day and age. And essentially, we're looking 50 to 100 years later, and, we're facing this situation where mass media has come in, and it's very difficult for people to understand what's true and what's media and what is, fact from fiction. And there is no beginning. Like, no one has drained the proverbial swamp of their own understanding to be able to then build up a base bank of knowledge to then have a reference point for what is real and what is not real, at least in the world of our five senses, because our five senses are here to guide us and to give us clues about our environment. And then from there, we can start to build up a body of knowledge, so then we can understand our reality, and then we can start to explore that reality from a solid base, a solid foundation. So the first step in the Trivium method is grammar, is general grammar, is a way to describe that, or it is knowledge. Knowledge is the philosophical version of the first step of the Trivium method. So what I've done here is I've laid it out. So I've got this computer brain version here. I've got the philosophical version of the Trivium applied in philosophy here, which is like knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And then over here, we've got the traditional 7 liberal arts as it relates to word and word figures. And down here, we've got the Quadrivium, and that relates to number. And we'll go into that in a moment. So right now, we're talking about word figures and about understanding our reality. And the first step is really, if you want to learn any subject, the first step is to gather all the words that relate to that subject, to gather them all together, to identify them, and to get that, I guess it's called like, what's it called? Anyway, it's just gathering all the words that pertain to that subject, and then you can start to logically put them together. You can start to understand how they fit together, how they connect together. So for me on this boat, I had to use this Trivium method. It was like a real test for me to, because I had never sailed, I never fixed boats before, and I had to test this method out on the boat, on sailing, and on navigating essentially. So I would pick apart this boat and pull all the pieces out and identify what's this part. Is it working? Is it in good working order? And then I'd put it back together, and I'd do that with the whole boat. And this is like doing my grammar on boating, on sailing, on the ocean, on navigating, on weather. So I'd do it on all those, 4 components essentially. And that gave me a body of knowledge to then understand and to weed through and to connect the dots with. And it's so important to do that when you're learning anything or when you're taking in information, to have this process ingrained subconsciously so that it's running in the background. It's going input, processing, and output, input, processing, and output. And sometimes you're like, oh, input, input, input. And then you're like, oh, I have to go away and process all this stuff to figure out what goes where. And you might need to journal. You might need to create a mind map to really understand what you're doing, what you're going through, what you're consuming, what you're trying to learn about. And then you can start to output. Then you can go on your sailing adventure. Then you can start to speak the words. Then you can create rhetoric, or speaking, which is rhetoric. Or you can take action and perform and do your thing and practice. And then that results in feedback, which is then creates new inputs. So the feedback that you get from rhetoric, from speaking or from taking action or from your wisdom, creates a new input for you to do the process all again. So you're constantly learning. So in a nutshell, to begin this process, a really easy hack you can use to begin this process, like as you're flicking through on Instagram and you're like, your attention is grabbed by something. If you want to use this process, you can ask the questions in this order. So you can ask the question series is 5 W's plus how. So it's who, what, where, and when. And that is the first step of the Trivium method. By asking those questions and seeking the answers for whatever you're looking at, who, what, where, and when. First step. Second step is why. Understanding why. That's like logic. That's like understanding why. And then you can ask the fifth step, which is the sixth question, which is how. And that really like gives you the ability to speak about it, to create around it, to take action, and or not to take action. It really gives you the ability to take the input that you've taken, to have it processed by asking other questions, and then by asking how can I output this? How can I, be of value? How can we change this situation, whatever it is, whatever you're looking at? How can I sail this boat? How can I get home? That's essentially what I was asking myself. So that's really like this cheat sheet that you can use, is just by remembering the 5 W's plus how. So who, what, where, when, and why, and how. Remember, you got to stop in between and go, and really change the tempo of what you're doing in your mind by, who, what, where, when, input. Like these are asking questions. This is like being non-judgmental and not jumping to conclusions, but it's just taking the information in and like going, okay, cool. Who it is, there we go. What it is they're doing, all right, cool. Where are they in time and space and thingy, and when is it relevant? And then you can ask the question, why am I seeing this? Why is it relevant for me? Who's, and then you can really start to then pick it apart, understand what's going on behind the scenes of the information flow. So I want to just jump back real quick, because I spent a lot of time consuming content that was educational in nature, that was teaching me the Trivium method, that was teaching me, giving me examples of how it worked and how it can be useful. Excuse me. And essentially I found that it took a while of constant repetition of information. It took a while for me to find that this method of the Trivium method installed into the subconscious parts of my mind, so that it was running on autopilot, and I wouldn't be so like, it wouldn't be like stop and start, but it would be like free-flowing Trivium method in the background, input processing and output, and I was like, and as soon as that happened, like after I went through my sort of like apprenticeship of the Trivium method, of repeating, like having reminders in my periphery so that I would slowly be training my mind to be operating on this level, because I went through public education, or I went through modern education schooling, and my brain is formed because of that. So I had to reprogram my brain to be in accord with a method that reflects reality, that reflects nature. And tying this all back to quantum feedback, the quantum field operates on this level too. It operates on this principle of input, processing, and output. So it's a connection between your consciousness, your thoughts, and your feelings, and your actions, which is another version of the Trivium method, if you notice that. It's a connection between you and the quantum field, and the quantum field operates on that level. So in order to send a signal into the quantum field of your desires, of what you're intending to create, and and manifest in your reality, you need to be sending a signal in accord, like in resonance with how it's taking in the information and how it's going to be processing that and then spitting that back into your reality, so that you're experiencing the changes of your own awareness. In a nutshell. So we're getting real deep here. We're going deep. So that's sort of how quantum feedback ties into this, and how this is so relevant, and why no one's talking about the Trivium method, because it literally is the tool, the number one tool for you to free your mind, for you to cognitively learn your way out of artificial scarcity, to learn your way out of coronavirus, lockdown. It's a tool for you to learn your way out of the mind control global operation that's in place today, meant to distract you, meant to confuse you, meant to put you in a state of fear and fight and flight, and therefore you're not capable of really steering your own ship, navigating your own life, and therefore they're like, as a guardian would, they're like, oh, this child doesn't know how to operate in the world, so we better look after him. Meanwhile they created the problem in the first place, but we won't go there. So let us continue on this exploration into the Trivium method and the 7 liberating arts. So we've talked about the philosophical application of this in terms of gathering a body of knowledge and understanding that body of knowledge, and then having the wisdom to speak, to take that and to use that. So let's move into the words and the word functions of the world that we use, because words are what create meaning in our world. It's like raining now. Words are what create meaning in our world, and it's by only understanding the meanings of the words that we can actually start to, piece the puzzle together. Because in today's world, there's various meanings of very common words. There's a legalese version of English, and then there's the English version, and then there's all these different dictionaries, essentially. And that's sort of how deep we have to go down this rabbit hole to really come to know what it is that we're talking about, to come to know what it is that we're looking at, that we're facing, that we're learning, what it is that we're trying to actually pick apart. And that's why it's so important to get the dictionary out for the subject you're trying to learn, and to do your grammar. That's this old saying. To do your grammar. You got to do your grammar before you can move on to the next step, which is then putting that grammar together, putting those words together and understanding the sequence of events that happens. So I'll give you another example. When I finished one of my sailing trips, my dad called me up and he said, "Can you come and help me out on the herb farm? I got Lyme disease. I can't do it all. I need your help." And I was like, "Cool, let's do that." I grew up there, but I don't know a lot about it. It's been 10 years. Anyway, so I went back to my dad's and I did the grammar on processing, like on his operation. I was like picking apart all the bits and figuring out what the tools were, like different herbs, different herb extraction techniques. And then it came time to then start to understand how to do the flow of events. So I was lucky because I got the apprenticeship version of this educational experience, and he showed me, how to essentially sow the seeds, raise the seedlings. And this is sort of like the grammar of this whole process. Raise the seedlings, harvest the, roots, essentially, of the echinacea plant. Dry the roots, okay? Then we mill the roots, and then, and then we're starting to, this is like moving into connecting all the dots together, milling the roots. Oh, sorry, drying, milling, and then extracting the herb, and then and then everything's got its own little method and its own little science, and it really gave me a second example of applying this method to learning, how to extract medicinal herbs and how to create herbal skincare, creams and oils. So it's like, it was another example of me having to do my grammar on herbs, on herbalism and extraction methods, and then how to apply that and to understand the process. This and this and this and this connects, and then I could then have the ability not only to be able to extract my own herbs, to extract my own herbal medicine, create my own skincare, but it also gave me the knowledge and understanding to be able to speak about it, to be able to run educational workshops. And that's when, it really sort of became exciting because, I could see the full circle of this method. Again, after doing it on a boat, I applied it in this different industry and learnt really like this, very useful skill, very quickly, very rapidly, mastered it. So, again, like, health issues, immunity, I just created my own cognitive liberty around health because, I dove in, I went on a hero's journey, and I learnt medicinal herbal manufacturing and the other, offshoots of that, and which was fascinating. So, little examples of how to use a Trivium method. You use it whenever you're consuming information, and you use it whenever you're trying to learn something new. So it's really like a vital inner, an inner process, like an inner framework that you ideally install into the subconscious parts of your mind so that it is running on autopilot and your consciousness can be more tuned in and alert to other things that are in your environment, like logical fallacies, for example. Now, these fallacies, these are like errors in thinking or errors in speaking, errors in communicating. And I'm going to break these down a little bit. I'll give you a little overview of logical fallacies. You can Google logical fallacies and you'll find a whole range of, all this different information about it, all the different fallacies there are. There's probably over 200 different logical fallacies, but there are some common ones that are being used. And essentially, some of the most common ones, and really what you want to do is you want to start, training your mind to see logical fallacies and then to be able to, figure out if the information that is being presented is even valid or not. Because oftentimes when you see logical fallacies in information or in, in media, for example, it's often a sign that you can dismiss whatever's being said because, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't follow the order of learning. It doesn't follow the order of establishing a credible argument. So, some common logical fallacies against the man. So this is the Latin word for against the man is an ad hominem attack. Really, is attacking the speaker instead of his argument. And then another one is appeal to authority. So the Latin word for that is ad veracundium. And the Latin word is like a mnemonic, can help you to remind yourself of what the fallacy is and to catch it in mid-air, in mid-flight, so that you don't have to rediscover it downstream, so to speak. So you can catch it before it becomes, integrates into your mind and you start to create pictures around the information you're taking in, and then you create emotions around that picture, and then by that time, you're creating chemicals in your body that, follow that whole stimulus response, fight and flight scenario. So it's like another filter, another hack that you can do. You can search for these fallacies. So there's appeal to authority is basing an argument on an irrelevant, vague, or dubious authority. There's other ones, appeal to emotion, that's persuading by emotion rather than reason. And appeal to force, that's persuading by coercion or threat. We've seen all these recently. Appeal to ignorance, ad ignorantium, it must be true because it hasn't been proven false. So it's like, that's insane. Or false because it hasn't been proven true. So this is just appeal to ignorance. Appeal to pity, it must be true. Must be true / false because it's so hard. And then appeal to the masses. It must be true / or false because it's popular. So there's another one that we're seeing. Everyone run anyway. Appeal to ridicule is another common logical fallacy. So it must be true or false because laughing at the person. It must be true. And then there's another one, appealing to tradition. So it must be true because we've always done it that way. Now, another common logical fallacy is composition. And that's what's true for the individual part of a whole is true for the entire whole form. So, another common logical fallacy is division. And that's what's true for the entire whole form is true for each of its individual parts. And then there's false alternative logical fallacy, which is offering only two options while omitting other relevant viable options. Classic. And then a false cause logical fallacy, which is establishing a causal relationship from correlation or timing without sufficient proof. So it's just, I think we all saw that happen with the, corona thing. But we, obviously this is going to give us words to understand and give what we're seeing, it's going to give us meaning, sort of like a meaning-making device. Where was I? Hasty generalization. That's another one that's real popular. It's generalizing from an unrepresentative sample. And then there's another one that's really common. It's called the middle ground fallacy. So the extremes are wrong, but the middle, the average is correct. And that's probably like mainstream media. Like that's probably like the status quo, full on. And this is one that you got to really watch out for, is a red herring fallacy. So it's like diverting an argument by changing the topic. So it's like, there's a red herring takes a sniffer dog off its track. He's trying to sniff a trail and follow a trail. This is where it came from. And a red herring is dragged across the trail, and it's a test for the dog. If this tracking dog can sniff beyond the red herring scent and follow the trail, it's succeeded. But if it follows the red herring scent, this dog still needs training. So there's another one that's pretty common, selective evidence. Now this is real common. Selectively omitting pertinent evidence. And then there's the slippery slope fallacy, which is asserting without sufficient proof a chain of events. And last but not least, the straw man fallacy, which is refuting an argument by attacking the weaker version of it. So it's like straw man, it's like attacking the man. Oh, you're the guy delivering this message, and you're wearing a hat, so it's like attacking the man. You got a hat on. Anyway, that's all the common logical fallacies. There's plenty more for you to dig into and really unpack, and to start to integrate in your truth discovery method, your radar, your tool belt for navigating reality, navigating the world. So, and that really brings us, in a way, full circle on the word concept and navigating word concepts. And as we continue the 7 liberal arts journey, we enter into the world that is the Quadrivium. Here I've got a book that's on the Quadrivium. And it's an amazing book. It takes you all the way through number. It's very meaty. It's very dense in beautiful imagery. But essentially, the quadrivium is simply pertaining to number in and of itself, and all the different forms that numbers can help us to understand our environment. So, the essentially we got the trivium, which is the first 3 steps of the 7 liberating arts, and then we've got the quadrivium, which is the following 4 steps, and they have to be in that order because you use the trivium to build a body of knowledge and to use words to navigate your reality, to operate your 5 senses, and to have coherence in that whole this whole reality. And then you use the quadrivium to understand, another, fractal level of understanding above that, which is, relates to numbers and geometry and music and cosmology. So let's dissect that, because number 4 of the 7 liberating arts is arithmetic, or number just in general, like number in and of itself. The 5th step in the 7 liberating arts is geometry, is number in space. So that's when the numbers are creating geometrical forms, and they are all around us, and we are made of geometrical, like numbers. We are geometry. We embody sacred geometry. So it's important to know this and to include this as part of your truth discovery mechanism, or your life's the journey of learning about life that you're going to do for the rest of your life. It's important to include these aspects into it because it's so fundamental and so universal. And then we have number 6 of the 7 liberating arts. Number 6 is music, and that is number in time. So it's counting the beats, and and that whole, and music. It's beautiful. And then we want to combine everything all together, essentially, or at least in the quadrivium world. We can combine everything. We're going to combine number in space and time, and we're going to arrive at the 7th part of the 7 liberating arts, and that gives us awareness of our cosmological past, our cosmological destiny, who we are, where we are, and really gives us access to this greater body of awareness, this greater body of universal consciousness, by stacking this whole knowledge base, this whole journey, stacking our ability to understand words in one hand, and our ability to understand numbers and all their derivatives in another. And now we can truly navigate the world, truly navigate as spiritually enlightened beings. And if nothing else, like having this and learning this and applying this and really like mastering the 7 liberating arts is the number 1 superpower that humanity has lost. Let me repeat that. The 7 liberating arts is the number 1 superpower that humanity as a whole has lost. And that's what that's what I want to do. I want to bring this back. We're going to teach this. This is like, make this a primary aspect of us coming to know ourselves and coming to know our environment. And then we can navigate more freely and, have the awareness of, who we are, where we are, and why we're even here. So, yeah. So I mean, that's that's the 7 liberating arts. It's really like a lifelong study, but I think there are a lot of people in the world that know about this, that are studying it, that are applying it, that are teaching it, that are sharing their journey in studying it. So you just got to go and find those people and see what resonates, and really like start to pull on that thread of truth to support yourself by giving yourself the media that will continually encourage you and continually help you to weed through the lies and to find the truth, the signal of truth. And and that's really this fundamental, so for me on my journey, like, I want to relate this to me really, because when I was 18 years old, I crashed my car and I had this out of body experience. And it was in that out of body experience where I was like, on one hand, my body was in a hospital. I was in a coma for 5 days. And on the other hand, I was in this etheric white light realm of pure intelligence. That bridge between lives, really. It's like that, where you get that whole full life, like, revision, that flashback over your whole life, and you learn all those lessons again. And it was in that time when, I was being coached and guided by other people, essentially, other entities, and it came down to, for me to come back into my body that was in hospital. For me to come back there, I had to figure out my why. Why am I coming back? Because if I couldn't figure out my why, I would have to continue on another journey. I would exit stage left and begin a whole new journey, chapter, life, cycle, karmic thing, and I'd take, the repercussions of my car accident, of my troubled youth with me. That would reverberate through that experience. So I didn't really want to do that. So I was like, what's my why for coming back? And I couldn't figure out anything. And then I remembered that there were, I'd heard about philosophers, wizards, different people that knew, and like, that had an awareness, an understanding of the entire world. Like, they could wrap their mind around all the moving parts in the entire world to understand, wow, that's how it works. These are the people that are running it. This is how I can do what I need to do. This is what I want to do, and there's no limitations. It's just like knowing, knowing your terrain and being able to navigate that. However it looks, like, not being judgmental and just going, that is the terrain. Okay, I got a real clear picture of the terrain, and now I have all the tools and skills and resources to do what I need to do. So I knew that there were these wizards and philosophers, in the past that were alive. Maybe there were still some alive today. And I was like, I'm going to go and find what they know. I'm going to go and discover what they know and then embody that and then teach that. And this was my why in that out-of-body experience. My why became, well, how do I find what these guys know? And how do I, embody that and then teach that? And, when I came to, all I could think about was, like, I just got to figure out what sort of the highest forms of knowledge, like, an understanding and wisdom that is available, that has been available, that is known by, few people, like humanity. So that was my quest. That became my 10-year hero's journey to discover the highest forms of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And it just so happens that it's not just separate things. Knowledge is not separate from understanding, and it's not separate from, wisdom, having wisdom, but it's a system. It's a process. Like, it's a sequence of events that you actually have to churn through, and you have to actually, instill into the subconscious mind so that your operating system, is is able to take in information at a much faster rate, and is able to process that information based upon, all this past experience, all this, your actual pyramid of knowledge, essentially. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time something comes up or something's contradictory, or, someone throws an ad hominem attack at you and you're like, oh my god, shutting down, attacking me, and get all emotional. Because, if you don't put a filter between, the information that you're taking in, that information is going to come right in and it's going to trigger your emotions. And as a result of that, those emotions are then going to start to dictate your life. And those emotions are going to start to steer where you go and decisions that you make and choices. And, so we want to have something there to actually be able to filter out the information that we're taking in to figure out, is this true or false? Is it fact or fiction? And how do I organize this with the existing body of knowledge that I have within me? And, yeah, so then I can do something about it. But essentially, that was my calling. That was my calling. And as soon as I had that experience of that's what I wanted, that's what I was going back into this body that was laying on this bed in hospital in a coma, that's when I went back. And that's when I woke up and I was like, whoa. That was like an out-of-body experience. I'd never done that before. Not that I can remember in this body, at least, anyway. And I woke up in the hospital, and then my whole life pretty much just changed. I went on this journey, and it took me 10 years. 10 years. I was dedicated and focused, and I didn't know what I was doing. And, I wasn't conforming to the normal thing. I was just doing entrepreneurial things and not even doing that, and just following my heart and following this passion of I need to find this thing, nothing else matters. And that's really that was one of the big, most profound, transformative hero's journeys of my entire life. And now this is me returning home, sharing the information, and hopefully inspiring you to take the time to slow down, to drain the swamp of what you think you know, and to start to build it back up based on, a system of learning for yourself without needing someone to tell you if something's true or false. And if nothing else, that's really this, one of the great honors or great gifts that I feel like I'm being blessed to be able to share as a result of my journey through life. So this is a hero's journey. The Trivium, it's not like you can look at this video and install it into your subconscious. Your subconscious is already really wired. If you have children, you want to teach this to your children and really make this the basis of, the educational home that you're providing for them. So it's, really easy in a way. It's just going back to the basics and going back to the input, processing, and output of whatever it is you're looking at and whatever it is you're trying to learn, and looking at the grammar, the logic, and the rhetoric of each individual subject, so that you can then, learn subjects in half the time that it takes, particularly in public education, where a lot of the time they're just confusing the crap out of children. It's not even funny. I went through that and I was like, man, this doesn't make sense. Why don't you just give me the system and then the framework, and then I can go and do my own thing? And that's essentially what we're doing. So that is the 7 liberating arts and the Trivium method to create cognitive liberty in your life, to free your mind, to take away the the shackles of, the programming system, and to really give you the the tools to be able to navigate your reality, and to find, to not only look at reality as it is, but then to actually navigate that and to create your own, life. Fundamentally create your own life without the limitations that, that mind control, which begins in school, it begins in, primary school and kindergarten, it begins, in society. to live your life without the effects of mind control, and to steer that, and to really take off those like false prison of limitation, and to really like, uncap your potential. So, as we move through this course, as we move through this lesson, we're going to get deeper and deeper into, reprogramming your mind, using a system, using this method, using the Trivium method, and aligning yourself with, your number one thing that you're here to do. Because if nothing else, the lesson I got from this near-death experience was we're all here for a reason. Fundamentally, there's one fundamental reason why we're here individually. And it's that reason that's going to give you your ultimate dream life. It's going to give you your ultimate, forms of expression. And it's that one reason. That is your hero's journey to go on, to discover and to realize those gifts, and to really start to embody that vision for yourself. So, thanks for joining me in this powerful lesson, and really want you to take away, if you take away nothing else from this lesson, it is to take away, this 5 W's plus how. 5 W's plus how. Who, what, where, when, first step. Why, second step. And how, third step. And logical fallacies. So I want you to go and Google logical fallacies, and I want you to start to create the support that you need to start to scan your environment and scan the information that's coming at you for fallacies. So what I did originally when I was starting this was print some fallacies on a card. I'm sure there's something online where you can print a card out and you can put it in your wallet and you can look at it every day. Something like that, that's simple, that's always available. You can refer to them. When you think you hear one, you can pull out your card and you can like, oh yeah, that's ad hominem attack, or, that's the he's appealing to a tradition, so whatever, and it will help you to, dismiss information. It will help you to, dismiss this irrelevant noise that we're all being bombarded with by mainstream media and on social media as well. So, and without further ado, I'll leave it with you and look forward to hearing from you soon. Enjoy.